that despite all these efforts, which may impoverish us in all sorts of ways, we'll come back to that in a moment, it doesn't actually help the planet because stuff is still going on elsewhere, emissions are being created elsewhere, and Britain is quite a minor contributor to global emissions.
Britain accounts for about 1% of global emissions. All the countries which have committed themselves legally to a net zero target, that's mostly sort of Europe, Canada, New Zealand, Chile also, they account for about 10% of global emissions. The rest of the big emitters, China, no, they've set themselves a ambition, but not a legally binding target. Joe Biden, you know, to some people he's a hero, climate hero, because he's not Donald Trump. But he hasn't tied America's hands behind its back with a net zero target. It's just said he'll, 50% by the 2030s. And what's he doing? Instead, his Inflation Reduction Act is really, it's a piece of protectionism in disguise. Huge bungs to consumers who buy American-made electric cars and the like.
Tell us about some of the costs that ordinary people will face. I mean, for example, if we go ahead with getting rid of natural gas boilers.
Well, the suggested alternative to this is heat pumps, and that they work well in modern, well-insulated houses. They don't work so well in older houses, and there are 9 million properties in Britain which have solid walls, which are not easy to insulate. You can do it, but it's a huge cost. It could cost £10,000 for your heat pump, another £10,000 to insulate your house. That's a huge bill to place on some of the poorest people. And, you think most taxes and so on, regressive taxation is seen as a very, very bad thing. You don't put the burden on the poor, you put it proportionally more on the rich. But when it comes to the climate, the rules seem to be reversed. And when it comes to the wealthy, we hand them great subsidies for buying electric cars or for installing biomass boilers and the like. And the costs are going to land disproportionately on the poor. Both whether they're buying a car or they're buying, they're insulating an old house, the costs are going to land more on the poor.
The really depressing thing for me as a former legislator is you said in passing there that this went through in 2019 without a vote.
Without a vote in the Commons, yeah. It's unbelievable. And the country's attention at the time was on Brexit, and, few people even noticed that we were committing ourselves to this target. And it was put through, as an amendment to the existing Climate Change Act, which committed ourselves to 80% reduction. But to get from 80% to zero is a very, very big move, and it wasn't properly debated. The House of Lords did have a vote, and they put an amendment on the Act saying, well, where is the plan, how are you going to get there? And but they still nodded it through, and that's what was unbelievable. There's only one MP in the Commons asked, Graham Stringer, the Labour MP, is one of the few MPs to have a scientific training, by the way. He said, well, where's the impact assessment? New laws usually have an impact assessment, and the government said it's not necessary for this huge commitment.
In the short term, some of the impacts are going to be that activists are going to be able to use the law to stop developments. For example, if we wanted to expand an airport, the activists will be there saying, well, this is inconsistent with the law. Would you guess that sooner or later this act is going to have to be revoked?
I think the closer we get to 2050, it will become more and more obvious that it's been a big mistake. And yes, it will almost certainly have to be revised. I mean, one or three things can happen. Firstly, all the miracle technology breakthroughs, we get to net zero. Secondly, the target is revised. But the outcome I really fear is that the government will try and fudge this, target, try and get there by exporting our industry, exporting food production, placing huge costs on the poor and on the rest of us, impoverishing us, and with a very negative effect on the economy and society. So